Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Getting to the Bottom Line, where my goal is to put into perspective different things that impact your revenue, profit, and cash flow. I'm your host, Stephanie Smith. I'm owner of New Light Financial Solutions, where we offer outsourced CFO services to help business owners generate more cash in their business. I'm really excited to have with me today Charles. Charles, thank you for joining me on the podcast today.
Stephanie, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited about our conversation. So, Charles, tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Uh, Backstory, I'm a Midwestern boy. I grew up in Iowa, graduated from high school at 16, worked for a while, went in the United States Marine Corps at 17, spent 4 years in service, 2 years overseas, combat tour in Vietnam. Came back, was stationed in Kansas City, met my wife, married her. She had 5 kids when I married her, was 10 years older than I was. I claimed insanity, but we were married for 45 years before she passed. So it seemed to work for us. Got out of the military, found that my military experience was not valued by business then, as is very much true today. People who haven't been in the military don't understand what it brings. So went to college, got my MBA, sat for and passed my CPA exam while still in grad school. Went to work for Texas Instruments. Spent 15 years in the corporate world, big companies, small companies, turnaround, startups, lots of wonderful experience. Realized I was never going to get to the top because I didn't have the political skills. So if I wanted to run a business, and I grew up in a business, a family business, I was going to have to start my own. So roughly a third of a century ago, Ruth and I started our own business. And here we are, a third of a century later.
Well, that's awesome. First of all, thank you for your service. I appreciate the time you put in for us in this country, and I love your story. So tell me about your company. So you have a payroll company. What is it called? And why are you passionate about payroll?
We go to market as GetPayroll. Uh, the formal name in the background is Custom Payroll Associates, Inc. We started out doing accounting and payroll. And about a dozen years ago, I sold off the accounting practice to my partner, who I'd taken on over the years, and kept the payroll because I enjoy the payroll aspect. I like the business to business. Um, and I like that aspect rather than dealing with retail tax and individuals that get really upset about things that the IRS does that we can't control. My business clients still get upset with some of the things, the shenanigans that the IRS pulls, but they're business people and they understand that we'll make it work and we'll get it done. And it just sometimes you have to put up with the nonsense from the government while you fix it. So it's very much more of a business atmosphere. I enjoy my clients. I have a great staff. We continue to grow the business. It's having a good time. So,
Well, that's awesome. Payroll is so important because it's one of most business owners' biggest expenses, right? It's who you pay, who's on staff, and it depending on your business structure, right? You're paying yourself through payroll. What I'm curious what you see every day for business owners, what with payroll, what your suggestions and recommendations are for how to set things up, or what's the most important thing people need to know?
well, there's a number of things that are involved. Payroll's fairly complex, and there's lots of laws and regulations and so on. A couple of the things that entrepreneurs and small businesses have a problem with is, first of all, classification. Is that worker an employee or is he an independent contractor? If they're an employee, are they subject to overtime or not subject to overtime? The independent contractor status, excuse me, is not something you get to pick, nor does your worker get to pick that. There's a whole body of law that changes, that controls that relationship. And if you don't understand that, you can find yourself on the wrong side of the equation, and the penalties and interest can be substantial and can put you out of business if you're not careful. So when you start hiring workers, make sure you understand what their legal status has to be. And that includes whether they're legal or illegal aliens. But beyond that, whether they're independent contractors or employees, and if over time, because I've seen clients in the past that haven't paid attention to overtime requirements and come in for a labor audit because someone complained, and boom, they owe, you know, tens of thousands of dollars in unpaid overtime. And the labor department doesn't have much sympathy because you should have known better.
Mm.
So, and it only, in all these situations, it only takes one disgruntled worker to bring it all down on you. They drop a dime on you, and I promise you, if they go down and file for unemployment and they say, well, you don't show as an employee, well, I was, the auditor will be out within a couple of weeks to look at everything you're doing in regards to paying contractors and employees. It'll
Wow.
happen. It's not a matter of if it's going to happen. It's always a matter of when, because your state labor department will audit you. Period. You can depend on it. You can count on it. It will happen. So you're not going to get away with it. And if you have one upset employee, it'll take about 2 weeks before they're out.
That's probably so true. And I know there are struggles of what's considered a contractor and who's an employee. And I know I've been there because I've been both like a W-2 employee and I've also been a contractor. And the lines can be blurred a little bit. And I feel like you and I were talking before today, and you mentioned a new law that recently come out. So things are always changing. So, I mean, how do people keep up with it?
Well, the easiest thing is to use someone like me, because
Of
I keep
course.
up with it because it's my business and I'm constantly involved in these things. I'm on all the trades and all the emails from the government and all the updates, and this my conferences I go to discuss this. And you know, yeah, I'm kind of a payroll nerd, and so that's the easiest way because business people are good at what they do.
True. Very true.
Because they're successful. They make a living or they go out of business. So they know widgets or engineering or the law or medicine or whatever they do, landscaping, painting, it doesn't matter. And the example I use is when I grew up, Pele was the world's best soccer player. Wonderful athlete. But if you took Pele and you put him in a New York Yankees uniform at second base, he would be lost. He wouldn't know the game, the rules, the playing field, what to do. Pick up the ball with your hands. I mean, he's a soccer player. Well, it's the same thing for a businessman. They know what they do. They're successful at what they do. They're an expert at their business. Now they have to deal with payroll. They're Pele at second base. They don't know what to do. You've got to use somebody that understands that and is an expert and keeps up with it and understands it and makes comments to the regulatory agencies and can advocate for you with them as we can do for our clients. It's another reason I became a U.S. tax court practitioner. If we have a real problem with the IRS, I can take it to tax court for my clients for a $60 petition fee. That's it. That's all it takes for me to get them into tax court and get a whole nother bite at the apple with much more sophisticated people looking at it. So, yeah, unless you want to become a payroll expert, use somebody.
I think that's great advice. It doesn't apply to just payroll either, right? There's a lot of things that as business owners, we wear a lot of hats, especially as you're getting started, and knowing where your limitations are is good. And it's not a bad thing to admit you don't know, right? But it's nice to hear that you do all of these things for your clients. It sounds like you're a really good advocate. So if I didn't know if my new employee should be a contractor or an employee, you would actually work with your clients to help figure that out.
All the time, believe me, all the time. It's
That's
a
awesome.
constant question because there's advantages on both sides to having independent contractors and having employees. Uh, and so, depending upon the company and the person, and in a lot of cases, small business, they'll have somebody they need to hire for specific things. And the guy says, well, it's $50 an hour and, pay me on a 1099. Well, that's what they want. That may not be what's allowed. So
Hmm.
you have to know what those nuances are. And then in some cases, depending upon how you structure the relationship, can influence whether they're an independent contractor or an employee, because you can meet the law for one or the other. In some cases, you have the option to structure it so it can fall one way or the other if you pre-plan. If you just go at it willy-nilly, you're going to end up with whatever was there, and the government may see it differently.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, I like that a lot. And I know you said there's implications, right? So if you pick the wrong thing, you could have back if they, people leave and they're disgruntled, you might end up owing money, which obviously comes out of your bottom line. And if you don't have that money, could be bad for you. But I'm curious, what other kind of gotchas, in addition to the incorrect categorization for your employees, have you seen in the payroll world?
Well, there's a lot of what you don't know what you don't know. So
True.
you have to know what you need to file, when you need to file it, what you need to deposit, and when you need to deposit it. You have to know all those things with every state, the federal, the state, and the locals in many cases. You're required to do these things and you're required to keep up on them. And they don't have much sympathy. So if you, in this day and age with remote work, you may find yourself, even though you operate in a small geographic area, you may find yourself with employees in multiple states
Hmm.
because, you hire Joe to do some marketing work for you, and he may live 1,000 miles away. You talk to him every day, just like we're talking right now. So the world's changing, and you need to be aware of all those things you need to do. And then beyond that, the biggest single source of penalties is arithmetic errors.
Hmm.
So that's why all of ours are done on computers. All our forms are computer generated. So we don't transpose numbers.
I think that's good, right?
And so we use very sophisticated software that's updated constantly to keep up with all this in all the states and all the locales and all the taxes. And it's if you try to do it yourself, it's a very expensive and time-consuming process to just be aware of these things, let alone be able to handle all the changes on a constant basis. We do it for many clients. So for each individual client, it's not expensive for us because we're spreading that cost over many clients. And so we can do payroll for our clients for less than they can do it for. And numerous occasions, people go, you can't do it that cheap. And I go, well, yeah, we do every day, because economies of scale allow us to do things that you can't do. I can't build my own car. If I were to go out and build the Ford I drive, I'd spend several $100,000 instead of going down to the Ford dealer and buying it for 40,000 and making them money.
Right.
Economies of scale, they can do things, and I don't have the skill to build a car. I don't even tune my own anymore. The last time I looked at my Chilton book for my MG to change the clutch, which is a requirement of standard shift car, I flipped to the index and it said, chapter 3 to change the clutch. I went to chapter 3 and it says, step 1 on changing the clutch, remove the engine. See chapter 5. That was the last time I worked on a car. I outsource that. That's what you should do in business, is outsource things.
Yes.
I don't sew my own clothes. I don't build my own car. I don't mow my own lawn. I don't grow my own chickens to lay eggs. I don't do a lot of things. I outsource those to people who have the skill set, the knowledge, the economies of scale to do that effectively and inexpensively. And that's what a businessman should do, is outsource those things that are not central to your business. You were saying that, we all wear all the hats when we start. And
Hmm.
you can see what that's done to my hair. And you need to start handing those off as quickly as you can afford to do so to people who can do the job in many cases better than you can do it for with less money than what you would spend on your own time doing it. And first rule of time management, of course, is only do what only you can do.
Right. Well, and
And I
payroll is
mean,
very important, right? Because other people rely on that. It's not just you and taking money out. If you do have payroll, you're not just paying yourself through draws, like, and you have staff, people depend on that and they need it on time. And you
correct.
there's the aspect before payroll, like you need to make sure you have enough money to pay payroll, which is a different conversation, but I'm sure you've
Yes.
seen that happen too, where there are no or not enough funds to pay payroll, and then that probably causes more issues.
And that there's a point there. And I tell my clients, if you can't pay the taxes on the payroll, don't pay the payroll. Because if you don't pay the payroll, you're going to upset your employees. If you don't pay the taxes, they never forget.
Hmm.
They never forgive. And the portion of taxes, and this is very important, the portion of the taxes that are withheld from employees' pay, you can't get away from paying. There's no bankruptcy protection. There's nothing. They will come after you personally,
Hmm.
even if it's in the corporation. They will come after you as the business owner, as the responsible party for those monies that were withheld from your employees' payroll. They'll take your house. I've seen it happen. They'll
Wow.
take the clothes off your back. They'll take everything you own to pay those taxes. And there's no forgiveness. Okay.
That's
So
crazy.
if you can't pay those taxes, don't pay the payroll because then you don't owe the taxes.
That's true. Very true. Man, I didn't know that. But that is
Yeah,
important to know, right? Is the,
it's critical.
yeah. Because you're taking, I mean, you've collected that money. You should have it.
The government views that as theft, theft of wages, theft of because those were wages that you withheld to pay into the IRS or the state for the employee, and they take the attitude that that's stolen money.
I
Well,
mean, that makes sense.
if you never pay that employee that paycheck, those taxes aren't due.
So better to wait till you have the money and then run payroll and hope your employees don't get mad at you and go complain anyway.
And one of the problems is it's so easy not to deposit those taxes. Okay, they're due Wednesday. You don't deposit them, nobody says a thing.
Hmm.
It may be months before something it comes up from the IRS. So it's a real easy one to say, well, I'll just pay it late. Well, paying it late is quite expensive with penalties for late deposits and late payments and all late filings and so on. It can run 25% or more of what you should have paid.
Wow.
So, but it's real easy to do, and people get into that, and then they can't make it, so they pay the next payroll when they don't pay the taxes, and then after a while they haven't paid taxes for a while, so they just don't pay, and it just goes downhill. And if you don't pay it, and the IRS comes, they'll work with you to get it caught up as long as you're coming out of that hole. If you're still going down and they don't see you being able to pay it, they'll close you down. They'll come out and literally, put a chain on the door.
It's crazy. But they want
So,
the government always wants their money, right?
well, even after they close the door, they're going to come after you for the money.
They always want their money. Oh, that's such a good point. So I have a question. Your payroll company, do you pay payroll taxes on behalf of your clients if you set up that way or in
Yes,
general? Yeah.
almost exclusively, because that just solves the problems. In the beginning, years and years ago, we would give them checks to send in and tell them what to do and so on. And frankly, that was in many cases a disaster. Checks would sit in the drawer, they'd forget to do it, and so on. So we're set up as a bulk filer with the FTPS, and we send files uh, basically every day to the government with deposits for our clients. Uh, when our client comes to us, we set them up. We take a limited power of attorney, which allows us to advocate for them with the Internal Revenue Service. And we set them up so they give us the hours or the salaries or whatever, and then we pay everybody normally with direct deposit, and then we file all the forms and make all the deposits and are responsible for all of that. So when the IRS screws up, and they do, we have one right now. They lost a return during COVID.
Hmm.
The money is sitting on the account, but when it went to the reconciliation unit in Memphis and they reconciled the 941s and the W-2s, they said, oh, well, the W-2s show this much, the 941 show this much. We don't have a 941 here. They don't say that. So what that would have covered, you owe. Well, that money's on deposit with the Internal Revenue Service already. It has been for several years. They just never said to us we didn't get the form.
Hmm.
It's crazy, but we know how to handle that. It'll all be taken care of. But
You
they
said
threaten to.
years. How long after there's a problem are they allowed to come and like ask for their money or come back and say there was something wrong?
Oh, well, if they allege fraud, there's no statute of limitations.
Wow.
They can go back forever.
Hmm.
Okay. On mistakes, it's normally 3 to 7 years, depending upon what happens. Okay. But once they say, oh, we caught this, there's no statute. Now, there is one thing: if they assess the taxes, and it's a technical thing, it'll take a couple of years. When they assess them, there is a 10-year collection statute. Okay, on most taxes other than trust fund penalty taxes. If they can't collect it within 10 years, you still owe it, but they can't collect it anymore. They can't seize your bank accounts anymore.
Hmm.
And I've had clients that this has happened to. We had a restaurateur who had gotten hooked into a situation, unpaid taxes and so on, and he paid him $150 a week for 10 years, and then told him to, which didn't cover the interest,
Hmm.
and then told him to go pound sand.
I mean,
But
it's their
that
rules, right?
it happens. And frankly, understand the IRS is 100,000 civil servants. They're not bad people, but they're civil servants. They don't have the same sense of purpose that a business person has. So, they work their 40 hours a week and go home, and their 30 days vacation and their retirement in 30 years. And they don't have the same drives that we do as entrepreneurs and business people. So you have to learn how to work with them. That's something we've learned to do over, a third of a century. Uh, but I don't normally let my clients talk to the IRS because it's personal and they will get upset. And
Hmm.
this got brought home a couple of years ago during COVID. The IRS screwed up on our company's employment taxes.
Oh no.
And I got a nasty gram from them. So I called the name on there and was explaining to the guy what was going on. And he wasn't being a very nice guy that day.
Hmm.
And I found my voice rising as I'm talking to him. And he just says he's not going to do what he needs to do, what he's required to do under the IRS regulations and rules. I have them in front of me. I know what they are. I read them. Okay. I know what they're required to do. And he just said, no, he's not going to do it. And I find myself yelling at him over the phone. In the back of my mind, I'm going, Charles, don't do this. Don't do this. It's not going to do any good. And so he issued a levy on our account. It
Hmm.
took me 2 weeks to get a hold of his boss. And his boss said, "Oh, Mr. Reed, no, that shouldn't have happened. We'll get it released today, and everything's fine, and it all go away." And it did.
That's good.
But that's because I knew who to talk to
Right.
and how to
I was gonna
handle this.
say
We had one case that took 9 years to solve,
9 years.
and it took a call to the deputy director of appeals in D.C., who I'd met when I was on the IRS Advisory Council, because the guy up the chain, I'd gone way up the chain that I needed to talk to next, would return my calls. So I called her in DC and I said, "So and so works for you?" And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "He won't return my calls." She said, "I'll have him call you." He
I
called
bet
me
he
that
called real quick.
afternoon.
Yeah.
That afternoon. It had taken a year. I'd been calling him. I had a record of each call I'd made to him every 2 weeks for a year,
Oh, crazy.
and left messages. And he blamed it on changes in the phone system.
Of
Yeah,
course.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. And so we talked it out and we put it with a new appeals office, and they looked at it. And my client, who now owed $95,000, got a $400 refund.
Oh, wow. You got the money
But
back.
it took 9 years.
9 years. Well, I would rather have you on my side doing it for me than me trying to do anything on my own because I definitely wouldn't have gotten money back.
That's what my client's lawyer said. Next time that comes up, I'm calling you, Charles.
Calling you. Awesome. Oh, wow. Well, I have learned so much about payroll today. Let's see, one of my takeaways from this conversation is don't pay your employees if you can't pay taxes, but you want to pay your employees. So, have enough
Oh,
money in the
absolutely.
bank to pay your employees. So I would love to know if there's one thing you want everyone to know about payroll, what would that be?
Dealing with the IRS, the IRS makes millions of mistakes every year. They issued recently $13 billion in employment tax penalties. A large portion of those got abated because they were issued in error.
Hmm.
Misunderstandings, errors, missing paperwork, old systems, different silos that don't talk to each other at the IRS, all kinds of problems with obsolete technology and civil servants. So dealing with the IRS is a whole series of no's followed by a single yes. So when you're dealing with the IRS, appeal, 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 appeal. If you're right, keep appealing. Don't give up.
Hmm.
Now, if it's $10, just write the check. It's not worth the effort. Okay. But if it's worth it to you, continue to appeal it or have somebody continue to appeal it up to and including tax court if necessary, because you'd be amazed what can happen if you are diligent and don't give up.
So never give up. But more importantly, hire Charles and his company to do your payroll. So you have someone who knows what they're doing and can do it for you and do it right and make sure you don't get stuck with a bunch of fines and end up having to pay out of your pocket for things.
Exactly.
So that said, um, Charles, if someone wanted to know more about you and your company, or maybe they want to sign up for payroll through you, how would they go about doing that? What's the best way?
We're GetPayroll on the web. So getpayroll.com. We're all over the place. We've got all kinds of YouTube videos for educational and some fun ones. We have one with the IRS as the Army of the Living Dead. That's cute. It's a Halloween one. So they can find us on the web. My email is cjr@getpayroll.com. And if they've got a quick question, 972-353-0000.
Awesome. I will include all that information in the show notes if anyone is looking for you. And I hope if you're looking for payroll help, reach out to Charles. He can definitely help you. If you want to learn more about me and what we do, you can find me on my website, www.newlightfs.com. And I just want to say thank you again so much for chatting with me today, Charles. Been a pleasure speaking with you.
My pleasure.
And that's it for this episode of Getting to the Bottom Line. I hope you enjoyed it, and I can't wait to see you all on the next one. Thanks, everyone.